Hello to all our history nerds and curious minds. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. Today, we'll look into a chapter of history that's often overshadowed by the much larger events of the Cold War, the Rhodesian Bush Wars. So join me as we explore this untold story, setting the stage. Before we delve into it, let's set the scene first. Picture this: Southern Africa in the 1960s. With the struggle against colonialism and the quest for independence in full swing. Our spotlight today is on Rhodesia, a country of Southern Africa undergoing a revolutionary transformation. Now, what makes Rhodesia different from other African nations? It was a self-governing British colony with a unique set of challenges. In 1965, Ian Smith, leader and Prime Minister of the white minority government, declared independence from Britain. He feared that the winds of change blowing across the African continent might threaten their privileged position. Escalation of violence and international reactions. Rhodesia experienced a significant escalation of violence in the mid to late 60s and early 70s. As the white minority government led by Ian Smith clung to power, tensions increased even more. The disenfranchised black majority challenged the oppressive white regime, which led to a series of peaceful protests and demonstrations. However, the Rhodesian security forces responded with inhumane brutality. This sparked a cycle of violence and resistance. The ever-growing injustices led to the formation of various black nationalist groups advocating for an end to white minority rule. Alarmed by the escalating violence, the international community began condemning the actions of the Rhodesian government. However, the Cold War dynamics complicated the response. Some Western nations were hesitant to take a strong stance against a government that was at the very least against communism. The unrecognized state. So, here we have this little self-declared independent state, Rhodesia, facing opposition not only from the international community, but also from within its borders. The majority of the native population was made up of black Africans. They were denied basic political rights, and it was causing tension and discontent. In the international landscape, it was the period of the Cold War. The world was abuzz with the tension that had been brewing mainly between the United States and the Soviet Union, and Rhodesia offered a perfect opportunity for them to play out their politics. So, as the rest of the world condemned Rhodesia's unilateral declaration, the Cold War dynamics have entered the scene. The Soviet Union and its allies sided with the nationalist groups fighting against colonial regimes. The United States and its Western allies, on the other hand, found themselves in a conundrum. They were trying to support the anti-communist government in Rhodesia while also advocating for the protection of human rights. Guerrilla warfare and the birth of Zipra and Zanla. With the increasing injustices and the unstable political landscape, we see the emergence of two main guerrilla groups: Zipra, Zimbabwe People's Revolutionary Army, and Zanla, Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army. These groups were born out of the struggle for black majority rule in Rhodesia, and they did not want to play nice. Zipra, under the command of Joshua Nkomo, received support from the Eastern Bloc as well as from the neighboring country Zambia. On the other side, Zanla, led by Josiah Tongogara, found both political sanctuary and support from the newly independent nation Mozambique. Both groups, while sharing a common goal of ending the white minority rule, had distinct ideologies. The Soviet Union and China, seeking influence in Africa, saw an opportunity and therefore backed Zipra and Zanla in their fight against a pro-Western government. As Zipra received aid from the Soviet Union and China, Zanla, with its Marxist-Leninist ideology, found support from the Soviet Union and Cuba. This external aid transformed the conflict into a proxy battleground within the larger Cold War struggle for global influence. Escalation of guerrilla warfare. Once Zipra and Zanla were firmly established, the Rhodesian Bush Wars entered a new phase of guerrilla warfare. Both groups adopted hit-and-run tactics, utilizing the challenging terrain and their knowledge of the bush to their advantage. It was like a deadly game of hide and seek. The Rhodesian security forces were not equipped to handle guerrilla warfare, and so they struggled to contain the insurgency. The guerrilla fighters operated in small, mobile units, which made it difficult for the conventional military to engage them in battle effectively. The military, under Ian Smith's leadership, implemented a scorched earth policy to flush out the guerrillas entirely. This led to widespread displacement and suffering among the civilian population and prolonged the conflict. International complications. Now, as if things weren't complicated enough, the international community's response, or lack thereof, made it more complex. The United Nations imposed economic sanctions on Rhodesia to isolate it and force the white minority government into negotiations for a peaceful resolution. Despite the sanctions, Rhodesia employed a series of creative and controversial strategies to keep its economy afloat. One key approach was to establish trade routes and partnerships with sympathetic nations such as South Africa, Portugal, and some in the Middle East. Rhodesia also implemented domestic strategies to keep the economy running. The government initiated programs to boost agricultural production, reduce dependency on external imports, and stimulate the local economy. While these strategies allowed Rhodesia to survive in the short term, they came at a cost. The civilian population faced shortages of essential goods, inflation, and a decline in the standard of living. The economic hardships exacerbated the social and political tensions within the country, while the international pressure continued to mount, shifting alliances. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. As the 70s rolled on, the geopolitical landscape shifted, and there was a thaw in their Cold War relations. This change in dynamics had a ripple effect on global conflicts, including the Rhodesian Bush War. Suddenly, the superpowers were no longer as invested in supporting their proxy groups in every corner of the globe. This shift forced a recalibration of alliances, with both ZIPRA and ZANLA having to adapt to the changing international climate. Lancaster House Agreement and Independence. Now, imagine you've been living in the bush, fighting for your cause, and suddenly the music changes. The late 70s saw negotiations taking place, culminating in the Lancaster House Agreement of 1979. This agreement paved the way for a new era in Rhodesia, the birth of Zimbabwe. In 1980, Zimbabwe gained independence, and Robert Mugabe, the leader of ZANU, Zimbabwe African National Union, became the country's first black prime minister. The Rhodesian Bush War, a conflict that spanned over a decade, had finally come to an end. Legacy and aftermath. So we've covered the political drama of the Rhodesian Bush Wars, but what about the aftermath? The legacy of this conflict continues to reverberate through the region, shaping the geopolitical and socio-economic trajectory of the newly independent Zimbabwe. The transition from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe was not all smooth sailing. Robert Mugabe, the first Prime Minister, once hailed as a hero for his role in the liberation struggle, faced criticism for his policies. The economic woes and political instability made the early years of independence difficult. Beyond the borders of Zimbabwe, the Rhodesian Bush Wars left a lasting impact on neighboring countries. The involvement of Zambia and Mozambique in supporting ZIPRA and ZANLA had consequences for their own political and economic trajectories. Lessons learned. The Rhodesian Bush Wars serve as a poignant reminder of the complex interplay between local conflicts and global power struggles. The superpower rivalry during the Cold War era often fueled and prolonged regional conflicts, leaving communities caught in the crossfire. The lessons from this forgotten conflict underscore the importance of addressing root causes, fostering inclusive dialogue, and finding diplomatic solutions to prevent the escalation of violence. The human toll of war, displacement, and suffering emphasizes the need for international cooperation in promoting peace and stability. Conclusion. And there you have it, a deeper dive into the legacy and aftermath of the Rhodesian Bush Wars, from the challenges faced by post-independent Zimbabwe to the ripple effects on neighboring nations. This conflict's impact was far-reaching and enduring. If you found this exploration insightful, give it a thumbs up. Share it with fellow history enthusiasts and let me know in the comments your thoughts on the Rhodesian Bush Wars. Until the next time,